Well, good evening, members. Before I open the meeting formally, could I please ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback? Could I also ask any remote participants to keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally do not use a camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. Please note that the meeting will be recorded, and data collected during recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swilborough Council or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not possible to identify you, and you will not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Could I ask members to speak loudly and clearly into their microphones and to switch their microphone off after speaking, otherwise remote participants may be unable to hear the next speaker. Welcome everyone to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting, including any visiting members attending remotely and members of the public. And also welcome to an absolute plethora of staff here that have joined us this evening too. I won't name you all individually, I'm sure you'll forgive me for that. There is no fire drill planned, and if the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use any lifts. And can I now ask if anyone in attendance requires extra assistance in evacuation? Right, thank you very much. I'll take that as a no. We move on to item 2 then. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies for absence for Councillor Angela Harrison, who is substituted by Councillor Karen Watson.
Thank you. Members, could I ask you to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of September 2024, minute numbers 221 to 233, please? Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, the recommendation number 2 on 229, a requirement for a member briefing on all 6 options being progressed. I don't think there was agreement that all 6 options would be progressed. I think that should just say member briefing on all 6 options, because there hasn't been a decision to progress all 6.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So that's,
we'll have that amended, thank you.
and the other bit is on chapter, it feels like it.
We haven't started yet.
Point 231, I'm just wondering what the vice-chaired resources committee is. I imagine it's supposed to be policy and resources, but even then I might be wrong.
No, I think you're probably right.
So those 2 amendments, happy to move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Those in favour? Thank you, members. We'll now move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Any members got any declarations? Councillor Hunt, please.
Probably non-pecuniary interest in item 14, beach huts, because I have a beach hut myself, but I'm not involved in any of the tender or anything, so
Do you rent it?
could still be here.
Thank you. Right, we move on to item 5, which is the risk management half-yearly report. And I think our officer to introduce this one for us, please. What's just going to do? Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This is the Risk Management Update Report. It's agenda item 5 on page 5 of your agenda packs. So the purpose of this report is to provide members of the Policy and Resources Committee with an overview of the risks that could prevent achievement of the Council's objectives and strategic priorities, and also how these risks are being managed. So these risks are routinely reported and monitored by the senior management team here at Swale Borough Council. And I'm just going to run through a couple of main headlines for you today. So the overall number of risks has increased, and this has increased as a result of incorporating the shared services of revenues and benefits into the overall shared service. And some additional risks have been identified from a recent Department for Work and Pensions audit that was undertaken on that service. So that has increased the overall number of risks that we are monitoring in that area. The strategic risks have remained relatively static since the last report that I presented to you. There's only one risk that has reduced, which is the elections risk, and that will be removed from the strategic risk register as it is no longer a strategic risk, the areas that were covered in that. So over the next few months, we're going to undertake a review with officers and the relevant members around some other risks that are associated with financial implications of Kent County Council funding and how that will impact Swale Borough Council. And we'll also be looking at other changes to national policy and future funding implications as well, which we will bring back to this committee at our next update. So I'm happy to take any questions if members have any.
Thank you, Catherine. Members, any questions? Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments or for clarification, if I may. Page 16, reference, first one, G, design of major contracts, significant changes in how major contracts are delivered when the contract expires. Given recent and actually developments over the last 6-9 months and the work of the scrutiny committee in terms of the waste contracts, obviously there are lessons to be learnt from that. I'm surprised that it only came out as an amber, given the, with all due respect, sheer volume of mess that was resulted from that. Page 17, J, struggles to recruit and retain right staff. I hope we're not going to retain wrong staff, but on the key existing controls, ongoing consultation 34-hour week. Well, that's not an ongoing consultation. As far as I recall, that's been agreed and is now policy. But specifically, I'm interested in the explore further creation of career grades. I'd be interested if there's any more on that. But how explore and increase HR resources to support alternative recruitment methods. If we increase the number of staff, if we're struggling to recruit in certain posts, how is an increase of HR and alternative recruitment methods going to attract more people to actually apply for those jobs? It's not just a case of throwing people at it, it's actually what is it we're going to be doing and what actually are these alternative recruitment methods, because they're fairly standard across the entire spectrum. They're my two. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Catherine, did you want to come back, please?
I'll come back as best I can, but I may need Emma to step in as well and provide some answers. Fine. So in terms of G with the waste contract, we did review that one back in June, and it did go up to red back in June. It was certainly at that point, and we've had some further reviews and things, and it was my understanding that we were improving on where it was, but I'm happy to take that one back, and potentially Emma can give a bit more of an update on that one. With regards to J and the human resources, so HR were developing a new workforce strategy, and I think as part of that and some discussions that had been had, certainly at senior management team, there was discussion around recruiting an officer to assist with recruitment specifically. It's something that some of our other partners have undertaken and are currently doing, and it may be that utilising some of that support and that what our other partners are doing and looking at them as a best practice model. These are things that are currently being explored rather than in place at the moment. So we can, if you would like, I can take it away and get a bit more input for information for you on what they are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add, in terms of G, the way I read this is it's wider than just the waste contract. It's several other contracts. So I think on the average, that's probably where it's balanced to an amber. But I can understand, Councillor, why you've mentioned waste, because it's our biggest contract. So I think we perhaps, and we will certainly revisit that as well, because of the work that the waste scrutiny has been doing and what that finds in terms of that particular contract as we move forward, because again that's sort of helping in terms of managing that risk. I might be wrong, but my understanding of the work, the recruitment one, which I've now lost. What one was it again? J, sorry. is that where we are struggling and where we are trying to attract to difficult posts like planning, property, environmental health, we're doing through HR all we can in terms of offering market supplements, various other things. And I think what they wanted to explore was different ways of recruitment. So whilst it would be similar in terms of websites or landing pages and various different things, just trying slightly different approaches to see whether or not that attracts different people. So again, I think that's why it's a work in progress. And it might seem simple, but it's not necessarily things that we through HR have tried previously. So we're just seeing whether or not having, you know, for example, with the planning recruitment recently, a landing page where the chief exec has done a spiel about how great it is to work here, and you know, things that seem simple and are with other industries, but we're sort of trying to see whether it helps because we are struggling. And career grading is another way of trying to, I suppose, grow our own. And so with Joanne's recent restructure with planning, that's something that she was focusing on quite heavily, because we wanted to try to develop those at, members of staff at lower grades to see whether they then could progress into becoming, you know, qualified planners, etc. So it's a way of retaining staff, but also giving that succession planning.
Thank you for that, and thank you both. Totally get what Emma just said and agree with it in terms of the waste contract, but the point, so with the work of the scrutiny still ongoing, I'm surprised, and no doubt, hopefully in time it will go back, as we will no doubt have other big, hopefully not quite as big, but we will have some major contracts coming through. Until that scrutiny is finished, to actually learn the lessons from that, I'm not sure it's actually back to that level at this point, but certainly I take the point, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 3 easy questions and points, and then one probably longer one. So if I do the 3, if that's all right, and then come back. Page 16 on H, we've got the actions planned or in progress as Junction 5 proposals underway due to be completed 24. That is all now open and running, so I don't know if that needs change or if that would make any difference to the mitigated rating. On page 18 in N, the existing controls that we've got, the environmental gains factored into major contracts. And I just wondered, because there's nothing in the actions plans, whether is there anything that's been delivered within that so far. And on page 20, we've got operational risks, and there's a couple of bits in there about IT security breaches and cyber attacks, which seem to be up in the red rating. And I just wonder why, just to understand a bit more about that, because if we've got breaches and cyber attacks, there's surely something that should be put into place and tried to get sorted out rather than it still being up in the red. So they're the easy ones, hopefully.
Right.
Okay,
Catherine?
so yeah, I can answer some of those. So H, the Junction 5, yeah, that's an oversight. We can remove that aspect out of there in terms of move it from an action in progress to an existing control, because that's where that will now sit, and review what that does to the overall rating. I don't think it would change the overall rating significantly by doing that, but it will just shift from being in progress to completed on that one. Risk N, so environmental gains factored into major contracts. So that's a key existing control, and that will be part of our procurement process for awarding major contracts. So that will be in there. So that will be something that will be picked up in performance monitoring of those contracts, and not something that I would necessarily report here in this instance. So it might be that that's something when some of those contracts are discussing with the relevant members or officers in relation to those contracts about the performance of those aspects. And the operational risks. So IT risks are one of our most significant risks that as an organisation we have. We do have mitigations in place. Last year we undertook a cybersecurity audit, and there were some steps that needed to be taken in terms to improve their process, and while they're still working through some of those steps, that's why we're still showing it as that current rating that it's at, of still quite a high risk to us as an organisation. And one of the biggest challenges with any of our IT risks is the perpetrators, shall we say, of such attacks and those things, the way and the speed at which they develop, it's often quite difficult for us to keep up with some of that. So that's why it's a continual process, and it's always something that we want to flag as high risk to make sure that it doesn't drop off out of people's sight, and to make sure that we continually monitor and review that risk as well.
Okay, thanks for that. And the last one I've got, it's a bit of a thread that runs through a lot of the different areas. And on page 13, on A, it says that it's unable to match the delivery of coalition priorities and core council services to funding levels, which we all know obviously the funding is getting tight and it's been difficult. But in the actions plan, it says that discussions are ongoing on how to address the budget gap. There's regular meetings being held, so there's a lot of discussions going on. But if a lot of this, we're unable to change the core services, we need to be delivering that. There's lots of things that we need to be doing. And through this whole document, it seems to be saying a lot of it is priorities that we can't deliver on. So it seems here that the only thing that can change is the priorities we've got in the first place. On page 14 in D, it's saying here that we've got the housing emergency, lobby government, which obviously is something that's easily done, but look at additional interventions. And I just wonder if we're unable to deliver the priorities already, how are we going to be able to look at and afford additional interventions? And then if we can do that, how are we going to get these mitigated ratings down? And the same point we've got here on E, the consultation working on Rainbow Homes business case and reviewing the costs. So that's all been looked at. But again, in that point that I just made in D, how can we deliver the housing if the costs are being reviewed? And what if that then comes out if it's not viable? So it has a knock-on effect to a lot of different things that are within there. And the same in I, it's affordable housing, failure to develop good quality viable project for the delivery of affordable housing. And in progress, we've got things like Rainbow Homes to become a registered provider. But again, if we don't know if things are viable or not, and we haven't got funding to do some of the priorities that have been put in there, it's going to have a knock-on effect to lots of different points, and nothing here seems to link up of how it's going to be dealt with.
So I think if Lisa was here, this would definitely be a Lisa question. Because I think the key thing that you've sort of picked up of there is a huge amount of what we do as an organisation, and a lot of the risks that feed through all of this are governed by the finances and what we physically have to be able to deliver what it is that we need to deliver as an organisation. So when Lisa works with members, we're looking at the planned savings and balancing our budget and all of those aspects. These risks are all taken into account at that, and the process they should feed through following on from our budgeting process into our risk management process as well. So there's the thread through there, is making sure that whatever it is that we're trying to do, it needs to come from our corporate plan of what it is our priorities are, and what we can physically afford to do, and how else we can deliver that if we need to deliver that. And that's a thread that we try to make sure that we capture in when we're doing the budget process, when we're doing our risk management process, when we're developing the corporate plan, to make sure that there is that, I'm going to use the word, I don't particularly like it, the golden thread of what can we, Swale Borough Council, do with what we've got, which is obviously a really key thing for everybody to be aware of. And this is to keep aware. I mean, one of the things we've got here, a lot of those things are consequences of the risk. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen, but that's a consequence if we don't do some of these things. So I don't know if any other officers have anything else they want to add on that point.
Claire. Yeah.
Thank you. Just sort of picking up the point on D, but it kind of goes along with sort of everything that we look at in terms of finances. Looking at additional interventions, and as you say, kind of how can we afford that if we can't afford our priorities. It is kind of looking at things from a different lens and seeing if can we do things differently that yes will cost money up front, but that can save money further down the line. And so can we find different ways of doing things that ultimately help us deliver on those priorities within the budget that we've got.
Okay, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me come back. It's just actually on the last point about ICT, just out of interest. What's the council's plans in terms of reviewing how files are stored? Do we still save things onto servers, or do we actually put them onto the cloud? And if we don't put them on the cloud, are we looking to shift to the cloud, because that would be a massive benefit and reduction in terms of the risk going forward? And the quicker we shift to that would be better.
Yes, we're moving to the cloud. We are shifting things from, as you say, our servers, and that is in place. There is a ICT roadmap in place now of making sure we move forwards and we can get to where we need to be in quite a short space of time.
Good.
Thank you. Don't see anybody else indicating. Councillor Baldock.
Just happy to move a recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wise, thank you. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. We move on to item 6 then, which is the council tax reduction scheme. And that's in the capable hands of Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. The Council Tax Support Scheme has been in place since 2013 and changed to a banded scheme in April 2023. This has meant that working age claimants now have less changes to the amount of council tax they have to pay. This brings a saving to the council because less adjustments and reminders should be issued. The scheme has been working well, and we are therefore not recommending any major changes to the scheme. In 2.4, the costs of the scheme are comparable with previous years, taking into account the council tax percentage increase. The minimum amount that working age claimants have to pay at 20% is comparable with most districts in Kent. To ensure that claimants stay in the same band and their support isn't reduced, we are recommending that the grid amounts in 2.11 Table 1 are increased by the DWP annual uprating percentage. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, I had a quiet week, so I've been going through it. Just one question, just on the alternative options. It mentions that it's not recommended. Just reading that first bit, but basically we've got other councils that have been looked at, and to make sure that we're consistent, the amount of support is in line with most other Kent councils. What is the most? Is there councils? Basically, what is the difference? Are there councils that are better or worse? And what impacts is doing it different having on those authorities?
So, Medway, which isn't part of Kent really, but our neighbours, they award 65% as a maximum. Folkestone and Hythe award a maximum of 75%, which we used to do, and then went back to 80%. The remainder of Mid-Kent, including Ashford and the west and north of Kent, are at 80% like us. The east of Kent, Dover, Canterbury and Thanet are all at 90%. Where we're all affected by this is we all receive funding from the county, police and fire, towards the administration of the scheme, and that is based on the maximum amount of support we provide. So if, for example, we increase the amount of support we gave to working age claimants, then the amount of administration grant we get would be likely to be reduced.
Thank you. Don't see anybody else indicating, so could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Carnell, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Boyne, thank you. Those in favour? And unanimous again. Thank you, members. Thank you, Zoe. We move on to agenda item 7, which is the accounts to write off. And that's you, Zoe, is it? Yep.
It's me again because it's my debts. They're all my debts. So this report asks for approval on the debts in excess of £10,000. The debts are as follows. Business rates, 2 of the companies have been dissolved. One is now in the name of the official receiver's office, and the last company has been liquidated. In all of these cases, we are unable to take any further recovery action. Housing benefits, we're asking for 1 write-off. This claim was reviewed, leading to an overpayment of almost £18,000. In 2023, the claimant died, and after funeral expenses, there is no money left in the estate. And finally, council tax. This account has arrears in excess of £11,000, and the account holder has taken out an individual voluntary arrangement. We are therefore unable to take further enforcement action. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It pains me to see this. There's not much, as you say, we can do about it, sadly, particularly on the business accounts, but it is what it is. Just for clarification, on the council tax one, if the individual's gone into an IVA, I presume they're not going to rack up another bill going forward if we write this one off, but in terms of making future claims. Because I don't want to be in a position in future down the road of whoever this person is seeing another one because they've repeated it. What measures do we have in place to make sure that doesn't happen, please?
I take a deep breath before I say this. When somebody takes out an IVA, the hope is that the advice agency they're working with will give them a lot of advice and suggest a way forward with their finances so that they don't get into future debt. When I used to deal with these, you look at some of the people and you think, oh, I hope things will improve. You look at others and think they will never even make the payments. Unfortunately, it's far harder now to get people to help people that get into debt to make their payments, but I would hope with this case that yes, in the future they will start paying. That it is often in the IVAs that they're paying their council tax, and that is put in as their expenditure, but quite often we're not receiving that money. So our aim is to get it to help them to get into a position to pay in the future. We now have a recovery team as part of Mid-Kent, and they will be working with these people to lead them down the path of paying. That's the aim. But it's you know, it's some people don't have enough money, and it's particularly encouraging the won't pay rather than can't pays.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just because obviously the meeting's followed by members of the public, I just wanted to ask a question. I'm 99% sure I know the answer anyway, but have we used every mechanism that we can possibly use for the recovery of these debts? Is there anything, for instance, we could have done at the beginning of, for instance, tenancy or taking out a property or anything of that nature? Or are we absolutely using everything we can do to make sure that these are recovered and actually have the support in place before these debts start accruing? Because obviously we want businesses to be there, don't we? Absolutely. But I think for scrutiny purposes, have we done everything we possibly can to make sure A, they're supported, and B, we've got no other routes to recovery? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We do cover every avenue. We look at every possible way of recovering money. In the business rates cases, we will take the smallest arrangement from businesses that are not making money, and sometimes I look over our business rate arrears, and for example I'll look at 2003 and think, Why is that going down by £30 a month? And it is actually, when I speak to Nick, who is the business rates officer, he'll say, oh, they've been paying that back since the debts in the year 2000, and they've cleared them, and now they've only got 2004 to go. And so every avenue is covered. It's the same with housing benefit overpayments. It's the same with council tax and with sundry debts. Within the finance team, we will try and cover every avenue and suggest things to people. And, you know, we will look at the more difficult ways of recovering or taking things further. We will look at putting charges on properties, and we will look at making people bankrupt if we feel they've got the funds and they're just not paying. So, but we can attach to earnings, we can attach to benefits. There's lots of different methods we can use.
Sorry, just to come back on that, if that's okay. I absolutely do take that point. I just think that, for instance, when we're looking at recovery of these sums, and people are walking down our high streets and they're seeing, for instance, empty business premises in our high streets, there is a little bit of an odd conversation that, for instance, we want these debts recovered, but we also want people in those properties and we want our high streets to thrive. So it's really great to know that there is the support network as well as the enforcement network, if that makes sense. But I hope all members will join me in following up that conversation as best we can on all committees to make sure that we're supporting our high streets and making sure that where we can they are thriving places of employment where possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. If I'll just come back very quickly on that. So shops are currently receiving 75% retail relief, so their rate bills are quite low. So if they go into administration or some other type of action, then it is probably something else that they're building up debts with rather than the business rates.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Mine was sort of similar or pretty much the same. It was around mainly the business rates, because when we look at that, it's a lot of money that has gone. And I was going to say, is there anything that we do to help that situation? Because there must be things with those amounts. They are really like the bigger properties on industrial estates and things like that we think that as soon as a company takes these up or gets into those issues, that hopefully someone is going in there and trying to sort out before they get into the debt. Is there more that we can do?
I think it depends on the size of the company. When Wilkinson's went under, quite often they don't owe us any money. It's the first thing I do is look, Carpetright, whoever, you look at what's owed, and often they've been paying their business rates. With the smaller ones, we are there to help them with economic development. Quite often they bury their heads in the sand a little bit and don't come to us. Some of their bills are quite large, and actually £18,000 might only be 2 months business rates, whatever, or a quarter. By the time we've taken any recovery action, it's built up to that sum. So compared with some of the bills that go through, it's actually quite low.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you just kind of touched on in your answer there that I know we can't go into any specific details about these businesses, but like Councillor Hunt, I'm curious to know what size of business racks up a bill of £40,000 in 6-7 months, and what size of company that represents. You said we work with smaller companies, but to me that feels like a fairly medium to large company. Aside from that was just a comment, but aside from that, I'm curious to know, the last time debt write-off came to this committee, was it July 23? Is this all of the debt write-off from the last 15, 16 months? Yes. Great. And just for frame of reference, is this an unusually large number coming through in one go, or is this kind of in line with what I guess you don't really, it's not something that happens frequently enough to have an expectation, but I'm just wondering if COVID, one of these is pre-COVID, but the other three, I'm wondering if that is a factor in making it more difficult for businesses.
Yep, some of it will be COVID, although there was an awful lot of grants through COVID, so there wasn't very much business rates being paid at all then. It was only the big companies paying it then. It can be something large can hit a company and then they're no longer solvent to trade. So actually keeping on top of what people owe. But some of this will be companies that just haven't been managed well, and you know, we will reach out to them, but we can't always help them.
Thank you. Don't see anybody else indicated, members, so could I have a proposer, please, for the recommendation? Councillor Gibson, thank you. Councillor Charles Gibson. And Councillor Lloyd Bowen, thank you. Right, members, we now move on to... good idea, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Those in favour? See, that's powers back in your hands then. That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Zoe. Right, now we move on to item 8, and this is in the hands of Mr. Sutcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Got the report before you to explain the proposed communication strategy for the organisation. It's hopefully pretty straightforward for you to have a look through and understand and get your thoughts on. It sets out the approach for how we want to communicate with the various different audiences that we want to reach. I mean, as it says, I have a brilliant team, but this is for everyone in the organisation. We can't do everything, unfortunately. So this is an approach to try and formalise that so officers know what's expected of them as well across the wider council. There's a bigger emphasis on planning and evaluation to try and get the best value from the communications we do, and to do a better job than we have at present. Hoping that the work programme will help us focus on the corporate priorities, so where, as a comment was made earlier, we're kind of focusing on the things that are important to this organisation. So if anyone has any questions or things, please let me know.
Councillor Gibson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for my tardiness. The A2 was less helpful than usual. It'll not come to us as a surprise to Phil that I have some views after our conversations today. But two things really. Just in terms of the communications around our audiences, I think it's really important that we, and this strategy helps lead us in that direction, so I think it's a really good report, but that we don't try and please everybody all the time with our communications. And so those communications that have a specific function, and the example I'll give is the one that made me angry this morning, is if we are trying to directly talk to the residents of Faversham about a thing that only affects Faversham, it makes absolutely no sense to use a councillor who they've never heard of. That has an internal communication benefit, but that is not the point of the exercise. If the point of the exercise is talking to a place, we should talk to that place in a voice that that place recognises. And so I think that's an important way of thinking about this, and hopefully this strategy allows us to do that a little bit more than the kind of rules-based system we've been using before. And on a kind of minor housekeeping note, I've been a member of this council for 2 editions of Inside Swale and a resident for, I'm going to say, 10, and I have never seen a copy through my door or in my pigeonhole or anywhere in the building. So that perhaps suggests our reach is not what we want it to be. So that's just a note. Thank you.
Thank you. Got a whole raft of them. Councillor Worcester, then Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a good piece of work. Thank you very much for doing it. It's obviously taken some time and effort to go through it. So, from my point of view, 2 elements really stuck out with me. Social media was only mentioned once, which was regards to, as far as I could see, what channels that the council were looking at. And at the end of the document, I was expecting to see another kind of section of the document that kind of would have linked in existing policies and documents that looked at comms in case, for instance, when somebody's going through the strategy, they would like to follow up on other elements, for example, what exists for members already with regards to that, or any future policies or documents that would be affecting this document going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to go on the initial point on social media, I think, yes, there is the kind of the listing of the channels and social media is one of them, but if you look in the sort of the core principles, I think it's page 10 of my copy, I can't remember what page it is in the pagination in the report, but it just say that it's placing strongest emphasis on our work on digital and social media activity in there, so it's going to be front and centre of there as well, so that's hopefully reassuring. And on the second point, yes, do take the point, linking through to other things that are going there. I know there's some strategies and plans being worked on behind the scenes that this will feed into and link to, so we can look to get them included in there so people can find them.
Because of the nature of the document, it may be worth, sorry, just to come back, sorry, apologies, didn't use the right language there, but I think it's worth considering that little bit of the document could be something that's very movable, so as we go, as opposed to something that needs to be kind of set in stone, because obviously by the nature of the document, comms is a fast moving area that is affected by many, many different strands. And it's a massive area for SWAL, and it's highlighted in many meetings where, for instance, communication could go potentially different ways. So it's a really important document, and I think nailing ourselves down, for instance, not having bits of the document that can move around and be really shoots us in the foot sometimes. So I'm perfectly happy to see it in the document. I'm perfectly happy to see it changing and being updated on a regular basis as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you. Just looking at our communications channels, we need to include also Swale Means Business and Visit Swale, because they are up and running and used, and it kind of regardless of who within the council operates them. And the other one is we have recently, I see, created an email to residents who want to keep up to date, and I think that needs to be referred to as well. That's not in that list.
Thank you.
So definitely to the point on the SMB and Visit Swale. I think you see, I think some on the list there is emerging email newsletter. I think at time of writing we hadn't got it going, and now it is. So the third one went out today if you haven't already signed up.
Thank you. Councillor Speed, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed that the working group that was put together to work on this document comprised the parties in the administration and the Liberal Democrats. I would like to know why the Conservatives, as the main opposition in this council, were not invited to participate in this process. Looking at the document itself, under external audiences, there's no mention of parish councils as an audience, which I think is a serious omission. As we've just heard, there is reference to the emerging email newsletter, but there's no mention of upgrading the website. I think that should be a key objective for the coming year. It's very poorly designed, it's very clunky, searchability is very poor, you can't find what you're looking for. So I think that should be included as an objective. There's also mention of reduced reliance on news releases to local print media. I don't know that I entirely agree with that. Yes, we know that readership of local newspapers is declining, but it's still significant. And also, of course, the journalists who write for the print media also write for the online equivalents. So a journalist who writes for Sittingbourne News also writes for Kent Online, and those do have quite significant readership figures. So we should not be ignoring those journalists. And of course, whilst the world is moving towards social media, it's often forgotten that social media often gets a lot of its information from the mainstream media, which is another reason why they shouldn't be ignored. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Phil, do you want to comment?
Yes, I can comment on most of those bits. I may leave one part for you. I'm going to take them in reverse. The reduced reliance on sending the news releases. I think that's reflects the historic thing where the focus in the organisation has been send a press release, let them print it, and now it's we know now that they're actually picking things up from us that we wouldn't have done as a press release because it's only a little bit of news, and they'll pick up from our social media anyway. So we're working with them in different ways. We agree the journalists are still important. I think checked before this meeting. I think I've had 301 press queries this year, so we have to work with them, and it's changing from the traditional write a press release, get everything signed off and send it out, and that's it, job done. And we don't want to be in that place. On the website, yes, I think my web officer would agree that it needs going over, but there's only one officer and it's a resource issue on that one. We have a long list of ideas on that one, and we're going to try and prioritise and work through them as we can. A few years ago we did a big piece of work to rebuild the site, and that took a lot of effort and time, and there's a tight brief on that, and it's something we would like to try again. It is just a matter of resource, unfortunately, on that one. So we always take suggestions and change what we can with the resource we've got available to us. And I'm sorry, you had another one on. Oh, sorry, adding the parish councils. Yes, that should be on the list. Sorry.
Thank you. And on your first question, I have spoken with Councillor Bowen outside of meetings and offered an unreserved apology because that sits firmly with me as leader of the council, and that's my responsibility, my role. So rest assured, I've given assurances that we certainly won't be going to that place again. Thank you. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few points on this. First one, in page 39, the quote about the communication strategy, about that strategy. I'm just interested who's that from, because it's not referenced in terms of if it's somebody famous or whether it's the leader of the council. I don't know. So who's that actually quoted to or by? On page 45, I agree about comments about social media channels, which could include Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, but sure that can't be. Please don't say that's limited to those, because a number of those I think are seen or certainly moving to yesterday's means, and will no doubt in the future be replaced or superseded by other methods. Can we also look, I think, in terms of how we can use our, not only Swale Borough Council methods, but actually where we might be able to use our partners and their potential tools for aiding our communications going out there. And out of interest, I'm just wondering, personally, the internal channels, the weekly staff bulletin, I would like to see that, actually. I think that'd be quite useful for members to actually also receive that, personally. But my main point, and Councillor Speed mentioned it, and I accept your comments, leader. You said right at the start when you became that you wanted to have an inclusive and sharing council. And then that first line, we believe that good communication, and seeing some of the reactions from people's faces, we believe that good communication is about engaging with our audiences, not just informing about issues and services. Communication is about giving people the opportunity to express their views and opinions as well as providing information. Quite frankly, there's some people in here that I think it sounds like it makes that utter baloney. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
So I missed the reference to which bit is baloney, which I'm really regretting, as I'd like to have addressed it. I was going to say I'd had my opportunity at IAM to comment on this, so I was going to move it. However, and as long as we were accepting the amendment to include parish councils, because I thought that's something we had earlier done. I thought we'd actually made a positive decision to leave the Conservative group out of the discussion because of their behaviour during the local election campaigns and twisting a lot of stuff that we put out. So I don't think it was a mistake. It was an active decision to include the Liberal Democrats, and to work with them in a positive way. Happy to move a recommendation, Chair. Point of order there, Councillor Hunt is quite right. I wasn't having a dig at the Conservative group or the Liberal group for having a talk about this.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I agree in the goals on page 5 that no, actually, sorry, about changing the relationship. So it's on page 7, relationship with residents through social media by using it as a discussion tool rather than an informing tool. I think that's right, because we should see comms as a form of engagement, not just as a sort of advertising board or whatever. But I think it's therefore something's missing from the goals, which is about how we amplify stuff that's happening in the community and with our partners as well. We should be using our platform to showcase some of that where we've got those relationships established. You know, there's lots of other groups where we should be amplifying and cross-pollinating some of the stuff to sort of also build our platform and extend our audience to people. You know, I can think of Visit Swale or the Sheerness Revival Project. You know, we sort of set these groups up and we should try and also build their audience and sort of get some mutual benefit from that as well. Swale CVS, another one. And there are other community groups. There's lots of groups that we've worked with who have a big social media presence, who've received grants, who would be more than happy, obviously, to showcase their work. And we do that in those sorts of traditional ways. But it would also just be quite good to sort of make sure that our social media presence is joined up and linked together as well, because that will encourage that opportunity for this as being a means to sort of have more discussion rather than just being a signposting or information sharing platform. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I was going to ask to add a bullet point to make sure that all political groups are included, but as the leader said that he would ensure that that would happen, I'd be quite happy with that. It would be good to be included in the future, even if some other members don't want us to be there. There's part of this on the priorities, and it says on page 47, the core principles, it says in there that it will be insight driven based on what we know our customers and stakeholders want and focused on audiences rather than policies, which is good. I think that the residents should be coming first and what we do in our communications and making sure that they have got the right information going out to them. But when we go back and look at the work plan, priority 1 and priority 2 all seems to be about the reputation of the council. Nothing in there is said about the residents. And as we look down in those core principles, the residents should be first. That should be the priority, the first, at least first or second priority, not what the reputation of the council is. The residents need to know the information, and that should be coming top of the work plan. And I'm just confused why that isn't in there. When we look at the actions, actually, I thought it was heavily focused on digital. There's a brief mention in the priorities there, acknowledging diversity of our population, range of communication methods, including those with limited or no digital access. But when we go on to the actions, it all seems to be digital, and we seem to be forgetting those residents that aren't on social media and online. So I just wonder what actions we're going to be doing to make sure those residents are covered. But at the moment, with those priorities, I don't agree with this, because the priorities I see in the work plan are just wrong.
Thank you. Phil, do you want to make any comments?
Thank you. I think I should appreciate the audience first thing, because that is central. I think I would say that the way we're doing with the work program, and focusing on the corporate priorities, because that's what the corporate plan is, and that is burst around. That is focused on what we're doing for residents as well. So I think it might be the wording might not come across as well as clear as you'd like, but on that one, it's about we'll have a corporate priority to deliver something for residents, and then therefore when we're planning how we deliver that, we start with the audience. It's a sort of case by case approach we'll be using with the audience first is throughout there. So I understand what you're saying on that one, but I think we've got that covered. And on the emphasis on digital, yes, I think that there's quite heavy emphasis on that one. It is a very cost-effective way of doing it, but it also helps my colleagues in the call centre if I'm taking most of the contact, as much contact as possible, so it means the people who can't contact me that way are easy to get through the phone. We're trying to encourage that as much as possible. It's also more efficient for users when done properly, so we want to focus on that where we can. But I don't, again, on the case by case, when we're doing a plan for any particular campaign, that will be part of the audience work. Will be, are they a digital audience? No. In that case, well, we've got to do something else then, and that's just how we'll do it. I think if you can see in the cover report as well, we talk about we have accessibility issues we've got to make sure we're addressing, and we'll be always do that.
Yep.
Thanks, Chair. I just think on that with the priorities, if that is the case, maybe that wording in priority 1 can be changed to we are making sure that priorities for the residents is up there a little bit more, and it's not just about the reputation, because that is as it reads at the moment. So if it can be altered a bit, with officers coming up with the wording would be better, I think.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be very brief because most of the points that I wanted to bring up have already been discussed. I was very encouraged to see about the inclusiveness that we're having with this communication strategy, especially with looking at formats suitable for people with disabilities and in a variety of languages, which I think I've brought up before. I think it's more, we have to make sure that we're inclusive and not exclusive. I would like to see a bit of engagement with young people because they are also our residents, and I think we need to start looking at involving them in whatever way. I know we're looking at TikTok and everything else, but they don't all do TikTok. So I've been told. I haven't seen evidence of that yet. But it is very encouraging that this communication strategy you've got together, as I said, the diversity of our population is being looked at. But I would like to see a bit of engagement with young people in this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer. Thank you.
I think everything's been said, thank you.
Thank
I was
you.
going to second Councillor Baldock's movement.
Okay. Have we got anybody else? Yeah, Councillor Boddy.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I hear what Councillor Hunt says, but those priorities, we've got priorities as a council, and it's really important that we stick to those and focus on those, and that the work plan centres around what those priorities are and how we communicate. One thing I would like to pick up is misinformation, and particularly around social media, is we can't just post something out there and then when residents start coming back and putting misinformation or stuff that is outrageously incorrect out into the public domain, that's not then corrected. And I'm not expecting that we've got an officer 24/7 responding to every social media post. But where we put a post out and there's clear commentary on that there is an expectation that where information is clearly incorrect or misleading, that is corrected in that social media profile. Because I think otherwise there's no point putting it out.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel I have to comment on the extraordinary statement by Councillor Baldock that this was an active decision to exclude the Conservatives from the working group. So much for collaborative working. He says it's because of some alleged behaviour during the election. I don't actually know what he's referring to, but frankly, I can come up with examples of other parties distorting stuff that we do. Certainly it happened to me. At the Swell Borough Council elections, there were allegations, there were absolute fabrication made against Conservative policy. And frankly, I see this as no reason to exclude the main opposition from working on a communication strategy for the future. And I'm a bit confused because we have the deputy leader saying it was an active decision to exclude us and the leader apologising for the fact that we were excluded. So what exactly is the council's position on this? Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I think I've given you what the view as a leader of this council quite clearly. I don't think it's open for any other debate in this meeting, and I think the sensible thing to do is to take anything further outside. Thank you. Right, Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you. I will correct you. I didn't mean the election. I meant the beginning of the dustbin issue. I think... Yeah, I know.
2 years.
1 year. I wanted to make a couple of points in response to what's been raised. Policy 1, we can't just change that. That absolutely reflects what has to happen. It isn't the role of our communications team to promote things that would be damaging to the council. It's like the civil service. Communications, the council is here beyond one administration. It should not be used by the administration in a way that could bring the council into disrepute. So I think that's an important safeguard, which I would have thought the opposition would have welcomed. So that is there to actually protect. I've lost my page, but to protect them as well as everybody else. So I think that priority really is vital, but we recognise the council is bigger than any of the groups or administrations. On the other thing, people, and we did discuss this, but obviously not when the Conservative group were present. There are all these different social media platforms, and what we can't be doing is trying to chase everyone, sign up to Snapchat this week, and whatever comes in forward in 6 months. We have to use those that are, got a history to them, not least because you need somebody who actually operates all of them. So I don't think we should be chasing all the platforms. Those that are established and that have a wide reach, yes, we should be using. Once a new platform becomes established and has survived for long enough for it to get a good reach, then yes, we can use it, but don't expect to see, I wouldn't expect to see the council engaging on umpteen different social media platforms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lohman. And then we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Going all the way back to the beginning of the debate and Councillor Gibson's comments, I agree entirely with the principle, but not with the example, given that I looked up the press release in question and it's Councillor Gould who was quoted on it, and I suspect he's more well known in Faversham than any councillor, although admittedly he wasn't acting as a doctor in the press release. The point stands, though, and I agree. And I was going to bring up an example, which was triggered by Councillor Mike Henderson, which was that we put out a press release last year about green flags, and he, where Councillor Gibson is sat now, said it's a shame we didn't have any comments from volunteers, and I fully agreed with that. When the press release came back this year, there were no comments from volunteers, but I'd remembered, and I'd gone back to the comms team to say, can we get those, please? And in the example of the press release that went out this morning, it would have been great if there was a comment from someone at Swale and a comment from someone at Faversham Town Council. And can we be doing, arguably it's already captured in the strategy by saying working collaboratively with partners, but if we can be more minded towards doing that more often, I think that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it a quick one?
It is very quick.
Right, good.
Two one. I just asked about whether it could be possible about the chief exec's weekly email. I just wonder what I'd like to propose that if members are happy with that, can we be included? I think could that be circulated to members? And the other point, very very quickly, I think we bury our head in the sand and keep using the same social media aspects, if we're losing potentially 500,000, I know I'm being extreme there, people, because if they're using one platform, but we're sticking with 50 people, old school type technology, we might as well throw the common strategy in the bin, because we're missing a huge audience. So we need to be willing to adapt. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
So on the staff email, you pretty much get it. It's a lot of the duplicated information for the one that goes to members every week. It's sent the same day within minutes of each other, and it's the same thing. Then there might just be a bit more about staff trip to go and see Wicked or something. But
okay, thank you.
Oh, you do my work as well.
Right, Councillor Baldock is proposed.
So I didn't know if you were going to vote on the proposal to include the Chief Exec's email. I wouldn't support that. No, fine.
Okay, so those in favour of the proposal? Those against? And abstentions? So that's 13 for, 2 against, so that's passed. Thank you very much, members. We now move on to, and thank you, Phil, agenda item 9, which is a plan enforcement strategy, and that's in the hands of your good self, Paul, I think. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to give you a brief summary on the evolution of the planning enforcement strategy. So the National Planning Policy Framework requires all local planning authorities to publish a local enforcement plan setting out how alleged cases of unauthorised development are investigated. Members are reminded that the Swale Planning Enforcement Strategy initial draft was first presented to the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group in January, and in February the Planning and Resources Committee agreed on an 8-week public consultation. The consultation report was presented to Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group in September, along with various amendments to the strategy, and further changes were requested by members as highlighted in my report, and these have now been made. As set out in the report, members will note that the language has been amended within the report to reflect the process that we follow by referring to what was previously referred to as a complaint as an inquiry or investigation. And the reason for this is to ensure that there are no crossed wires with the corporate complaints procedure. And for the reasons set out in the report, it is recommended that members resolve to adopt the Swale Planning Enforcement Strategy for publication on the 4th of November 2024. Thank you very much.
Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good piece of work. It's done the rounds a few times. Members have had lots of opportunity to keep changing it and changing it back. And I think what we've got now is a good and effective strategy that I'll be happy to move.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt and Councillor Gibson.
Thanks, Chair. I completely agree with it. I've seen it before, made comments. There's just one point I want to make on it. It's page 59, last paragraph of 3.1. It should be noted that planning investigations team do not operate 24-hour service. I'm pleased that that has been added. It was something that I mentioned at the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group. But it says there, well, firstly, the minutes of that group haven't been approved yet. And although we've got the appendix of those minutes, this part of it isn't mentioned in those minutes at all, and it's not mentioned that it's been added. So it's only through reading it that I've picked up that that's in there. So I'm pleased it's been added, but I just wondered how we get round this with minutes not being approved yet being sort of attached to this and things not being picked up.
Sorry, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I don't think we actually need the minutes to be approved in order for us to adopt this. Might be nice to have them at the beginning of a meeting, but I don't think there's anything there that stops us adopting it.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
agree with all that's been said about the documents. It's been around the block a number of times, and I think has made the necessary changes. My question was, in the spirit of cross-party working and following up a suggestion from across the floor, Councillor Harrison very shrewdly suggested at our last meeting that we invite the chairs of working groups to come to these meetings when they had items that were from their working groups. Did we do that for Councillor Gould this time?
No.
Okay, maybe. I believe we moved and agreed that, but if we didn't, could I move it now?
Is it in the minutes?
Another excellent question. I didn't.
Councillor Baldock.
No, we didn't agree with that. It was claimed to be protocol, but it's never been done since we returned to the committee system. I understand it was done back in the 90s before the move to cabinet. I don't see the need for a vote on whether or not to invite somebody to a meeting, but if they wished to attend, they could. Councillor Gould, if he wanted to add anything, could attend. So, we have a lot of different working groups. This is a decision-making body that, has the evidence before them. So I wouldn't support a move to make it compulsory to invite the chair of a working group, because there are some working groups that might not add a lot. Thinking of my lot.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not want to get stuck in the mud after finding that last comment about the Constitution Working Group. We'll have a few more meetings, and should be much better than it is. But who's the chair of that? In terms of the actual report itself, actually, on that last point, I agree. Actually, I think it's wise and courteous to invite, not to say you have to, but invite working group chairs to say this is going to be discussed at this meeting. If you are free, you are cordially invited to come and present it if you so choose to. I think that's just manners, personally. In terms of the actual reports, just out of interest, and this comes back to points on previous papers, reporting a breach, it's very digitally skewed. The preference is to report a breach through an online form. Yep, ideally, get that. Can also be done by an email. Well, if they usually, chances are if they can do an email, they probably can do the form online as well. But then the other part is we can send a letter in. And that's going to take such a long time, at which point the breach is then going to be possibly potentially a week further down the road. Can we not, or is there no way that we can incorporate into this for some people who may not be online, may not be able to get to a post office or to a post box, to actually be able to phone it through, and we record the conversation, so we're not actually interpreting as an officer or the member of staff actually records that and then can move that forward on behalf of the member of the public, should that need arise. And then my only other comment is a detail on page 65 or 13, which one are you looking at? 5.2, contacting the customer and our performance standards. I'm sorry, but provide a detailed response to the customer within 21 days. I don't think we're actually hitting our own targets on that. Well, I know we're not, because I've got one that's certainly over 21 days, and I've not had a plan to say what they're going to do to correct it, because we're still waiting. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at Appendix 2 on page 69, which is the planning enforcement priorities and initial visit response times, I see that caravans are in category 2, which is a response time of 3 working days. We discussed this point at the PTPWG, and my recollection is that we agreed that 3 working days is not an adequate response time if, for example, 12 caravans move onto a village green. I would have thought that would require a same-day response, not a 3 working day response. My recollection is that we agreed that caravans will be moved into Category 1. So I'd like to ask the officer, through you, Chairman, why it's still in Category 2.
Thank you. Mr Casey, comment?
Yes, thank you. So that's Appendix 2, Planning Enforcement Priorities. So yes, you're correct. It was suggested that the pitching of caravans be moved to Category 1 from 2. So Category 1 breaches are those that are irreversible once works have been undertaken. For example, works to listed buildings, that sort of thing. And as such, it's considered that the pitching of caravans on agricultural land should remain in Category 2, as the Council has suitable enforcement powers to ensure that any unauthorised development is actioned appropriately. And it needs to be borne in mind that not all caravans require planning permission. For example, caravan situated within a residential curtilage may not need planning permission. So it was felt best that we leave it in Category 2. But should there be any intelligence behind the report suggesting that there may be imminent arrival of lots of caravans, let's say, we will act appropriately and accordingly and most probably deal with that straight away. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, sorry, you did, yeah. Did you want to comment on that?
No, there's no sort of measures in place to take calls from members of the public. They are encouraged to report breaches online. We do also get letters from people, especially that don't have access to the internet, reporting breaches of planning control. But at the moment, there's no facility to phone in the breach. However, they can ring customer services, and they do often, members of the public, leave their name and contact details, and we always return the calls.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So is there any way that could be factored into this? Because at the moment, if it's silent on it, an option could be that they contact the customer service centre and progress accordingly.
Yeah, something we could look at.
Something like that. Just,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Baldock, thank you. Second to Councillor Wise. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, Paul. We'll now move on to agenda item 10, which is the solar panels at Swale House. I think it's you, Debbie, is it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So this report I'm bringing to you tonight is for the agreement to install solar panels on Swale House. We investigated ways to decarbonise Swale House as part of our climate emergency action plan. And one of the first priorities we did was to triple glaze the windows, and we insulated the undercroft. And by doing that, we raised our display energy certificate from a C to a B. We had a piece of work undertaken at no cost to see whether it was viable to have a business case to install solar panels on an investor save basis. The business case is set out in the report for you to have a look at. The report went and was considered and approved by the Environment and Climate Committee on the 3rd of October. And the recommendations are to allow and to delegate the Director of Resources to use reserves up to £100,000 on an investor save basis to provide solar panels at Swale House, and to delegate to the Director of Regeneration the preparation and award of contract for the delivery of solar panels on Swale House, subject to agreement of Recommendation 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chairman. Fully support this. Disappointed, however, that the climate emergency was declared in June 2019, and this was included on that, and yet it's taken 5 years. Say again, 5 years to get to this point on a document that was included at that particular time. That's not very environmentally friendly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Only to question whether there might be capacity for us to do more. This is great and is a great first step for Swale House, just in terms of saving it and committing to costs in one go, and that reduction if some kind of investigation of perhaps covering the parking lot outside has been done, or if there is a deliberate decision to delay that, and what the kind of cost risk of delaying that decision might be, if that is something we're looking at. Thank you.
Sorry, I can come back on that. Yeah, we are considering all other buildings we have, car parks. That is a piece of it's a larger project. We have a consultant at the moment that's working on our buildings, but I know the parking team, Martin, is looking at car parks as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks. I agree with this. I think the figures all make complete sense. And I think it's exactly what reserves should be being used for, not like some other things in the past. But if we can use that to save money, then that's what it's there for. The only thing I do just want to understand a bit more is on page 92, 2.7. It's got the breakdown there of costs, which would be total benefit is going to be 32,740 in that region. How do we deal with different organisations and companies that use this building for electricity? Because as a council now, we only use a much smaller portion of the building. Are other organisations coming in? Do some of those fees that we get as income for renting out office space come back in to pay for some of the electricity? And is that included in some of this? Because, for instance, if we have companies coming in just leaving all the lights on or putting in, I don't know, electric heaters or something, using a lot more electric, then that saving goes down. So are we making sure that money comes back in from those to either bring this figure up and save even more money, or make sure that we can get more into the grid and make more money?
Rest assured, with my cultural heritage as a Yorkshireman, any penny's a prisoner. So, in short, the answer is yes. Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Cheers, thank you. I think this is a bit of a no-brainer for everyone on the committee. In answer to the question why it took so long, it takes a long time for all the other work. There's a sequence of work that needed to be done, the windows and the roof, and you'll all be aware when that took place, etc. You know, we know that local government works at a slower pace than the private sector. I find it frustrating, but there we go. Anyway, I fully support this. I think it's definitely a no-brainer.
On that basis, are you willing to propose the...
Yep, willing to propose.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Lehman, thank you. Those in favour? Unanimous again. Thank you, members. Yeah. Thanks, Debbie. Thank you. Right, we move on to agenda item 11, which is the forward decisions plan. Any questions on that? Councillor Boyne?
Won't be any surprise in this. And the emails which have been flying around this afternoon. Conservation area. It's disappeared from the forward plan. It was meant to be here tonight. Yes, there was a discussion at the agenda setting about arranging a site look around. That hasn't been arranged, but at no point from my recollection was that to say that it would be pulled if that meeting couldn't be arranged. I'm disappointed, therefore, that it has come off. I'm equally disappointed that they've actually it's been arranged where it seems a lot of us ain't going to be around anyway, and therefore it's going to be delayed for months now, by the looks of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I share Councillor Bowen's frustration. The whole purpose of the accompanied visit was that it enabled us to make a decision at tonight's meeting rather than decide at this meeting tonight whether or not we wanted to do a visit. And it is really frustrating that it's been arranged after this meeting. And as Councillor Bowen said, at a time when most of us can't even make it because we're stuck at the LGA or on the way back. I would now propose that this committee puts it on for November committee On the forward plan, yep, on the agenda for November. And if we don't get a site visit, we just still have it on the agenda because otherwise, as somebody said, it'll end up being next year.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I'm just going to let Emma make a comment, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. I think just coming back on that, and I appreciate the frustration of trying to get a date. As you can imagine, I think Jamil with other officers have been trying to find a date, but it's always very difficult to find dates that when it's offered as a site visit to all councillors that people can make. So I think there was to and fro-in, but I appreciate it's not ideal. We will see whether we can find another date if the feedback is that's not a great date, and hopefully that can be arranged and people can attend if they want to at the visit before. It's definitely on the forward plan for November anyway, so I appreciate the comments that have been made around delaying that. My understanding from the officer is that should that be discussed and agreed in November, we can press ahead quite quickly with all of that work, which is great. And in terms of some of the other conversations around the site visit and the agreement of that, I think given it was a cross-party group of members that discussed it, whilst you could argue that it's not necessarily a usual thing, it's something that senior officers at that meeting did agree to, and it doesn't necessarily form, outside the realms of illegality, that's the one. And whilst I appreciate it might not necessarily be in the Constitution, not necessarily everything is. So I'm pretty comfortable, but let's see whether we can find a better date. And I appreciate that it's not ideal for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. From what's just been said, I think there is a few things that keep coming up that keep saying, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for the Constitution. Surely we should be going by the Constitution. If we're having a meeting outside and it does come up with things like the member allowances, it's not in the schedule for that sort of meeting if we're just turning up and doing it to be covered. So there does need to be some sort of formality if we are going to be having meetings just ad hoc outside. And it makes sense that it does come to this committee, and it seems sensible that if there is going to be a site meeting, that a vote is taken now at this meeting, and we agree that there will be one and it goes forward, just to make it more formal, that there is an agreement for it as we're all here, not just agreeing at a pre-meet.
Okay. Councillor Baldock?
I don't think constitutionally we can have that vote here because it's not on the agenda. But I wouldn't want to officially agree that we have a site visit now in case we can't have one before the November meeting. I think if we get it good, it would have been nice, but we don't want to delay it beyond November. So we've confirmed that it's on the November agenda for PNR. If we can get a site visit, it would be good. But it's not even a site visit because that's a planning issue. It's a accompanied visit. It's an accompanied trip. We meet with officers, members meet with officers. That's what it was intended. It's intended to facilitate an expedite decision. It messed up, and I'm sure all of us on that meeting are regretful that it happened. But I don't want it delayed further than November, so I think we just get it on the agenda. If we have a visit, we have a visit, but that's it. But Councillor Speed might.
Thank you, Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. When we agree at Planning Committee to hold site visits, that site visit is normally organised pretty promptly. This site visit has taken 23 days to arrange a date. I think that is totally unacceptable. I also don't think that a pre-meet is an appropriate forum to agree a site visit, and let's face it, it is a site visit. I think that's a decision that should be taken by this committee, not by a pre-meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got a proposal from Councillor Baldock, seconded by Councillor Bowen, that we definitely bring it forward to the November meeting. Those in favour? Thank you, members. Again, that's unanimous. Thank you. Right. I don't see anybody else indicating that, so we'll take that as noted, and we'll move on to item 12. which was recommendations from the Joint Transportation Board. We've been waiting responses from consultees, so we still haven't had those back. So that item has been removed from the agenda this evening. Item 13, recommendations from the Planning and Transport Policy Working Group. Thank you very much. And now we'll move swiftly on to item 14, which is a beach hut phase tender award, phase 1 tender award.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Report in front of you this evening is the outcome of the recent tender of the beach huts phase 1. You'll recall the Community Committee previously approved the progression of tender for phase 1. However, the delegation stated that officers could only proceed if the contract tender was within the budgeted figure. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was significantly over. So we've re-looked at the specification and have re-tendered with 2 separate lots. Lot 1 was the original quantity of huts, which was 26, and Lot 2 was for a reduced number of huts of 16, of which that was 8 at each location. The winning tender for Lot 1 does exceed the capital budget for this project by 59,719, and therefore the report this evening is requesting that the additional funds are allocated to this project, and this will facilitate the maximum return on the capital receipts and the future revenue of the project. The alternative options are to proceed with Lot 2, which is within the original budget figure. However, this will result in reduced capital receipts and revenue returns, which have been identified for both lots on the exempt Appendix 1. This is not recommended as we believe that the ongoing revenue and capital receipts will be reduced going forward. The revenue within the 24-25 budget assumes the increase in beach hut rental, and this will need to be reduced as part of the budget setting process, because it also assumed that phase 2 would also be being built. Sorry. However, the building phase 1 huts will reduce the revenue. The current 25-26 budget income budget is just over £70,000. The current huts generate around 35,000, which leaves a gap of 35,840. Approving this additional capital to proceed with the 26 hut will reduce this gap to 16,930. And the final point before I take any questions is both locations have been considered carefully. The Minstead location is an extension of the existing hut line, however, Laysdown is a slightly alternative location being pushed back against the bank to maintain the sea view access, which was as a result of a consultation with the parish council. We have ordered preliminary ecological appraisals, and I'm pleased to say they have now both been undertaken as of yesterday, so we are waiting the results of those. In addition to that, we have completed a flood risk activity permit called a FRAPper, and that will also allow us at Minster, because obviously the sea defence is at the front of the hut line, so we also need to complete that process. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you. Just before we do, members, there's obviously a blue paper in the appendix, and if any of you want to refer to that, then we'll need to go into private session. Councillor Baldock.
Happy to move a recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I agree with it. There's just one thing I want to raise on here, and it's within the legal, statutory and procurement. It says on there, beach huts have been confirmed as under permitted development due to the size and nature. I think there's a lot of debate on that. There seems to be a lot of legal cases that have gone through where there's things with councils being said that if you have so many of them, you do then start needing to get planning permission. So I think it's just something we need to be careful. I agree. I think it's permitted development at this stage, but I do think we need to be careful if we go further ahead. But one thing, the main thing I wanted to pick up in this is when we're sort of considering this, is that maybe we should be including it in the local plan because it is development, and surely we should be having this land in there to show where development's going to be. And that just may be a consideration that we'll have to go forward to planning just for consideration.
Yeah, that's definitely something. Sorry, take it away. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, I agree, it seems a sensible approach. The amount of money being allocated additionally to do 10 to 1, just to confirm that that's a drawdown from reserves is what we're talking about to do that. Okay, fine.
That will be funded by capital receipts, so there will be no revenue impact as a result of that extra spend.
Thank you. So, members, we've got a formal proposer and a seconder. Those in favour? That's unanimous. And that concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you all very much indeed. I hope you have a safe and dry trip home. It's unbelievable, wasn't it, earlier on?